we're so indoctrinated that serious relationships are all in, but not everybody's either capable of going all in or even wants all in relationships. So now the word partnership is evolving. I think it's about letting go of the traditional narratives and start writing your own story.
Welcome to the Blueprint Breakers podcast. What is a blueprint breaker? If you live your life outside the typical traditional lifestyle blueprint, you are a blueprint breaker. We are here to start a conversation, to assemble resources, and to build a community. This podcast is for empowered women in midlife and beyond who are preparing for a powerful next era of life. My name is Amy A. Palmer. I am your host and facilitator for our conversations. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show. To stay connected, up to date, and to receive all of our free resources and gifts along the way, join us at community.blueprintbreakers.com. You know when there's someone that you've followed online for years and then you finally get the chance to sit down and talk with them and it feels like you've actually met them before? Well, that's exactly what today's episode is for me. I'm thrilled to welcome Jonathan Aslay, someone I've admired for a long time, for a conversation that goes way beyond the typical dating advice. Jonathan's journey from personal heartbreak to becoming one of the most insightful dating coaches out there is not only inspiring, it's deeply human. We talk about everything from self-love and emotional connection to the reality of online dating and what it really means to find love in midlife. Whether you're single, dating, or just curious about how relationships evolve as we grow, I promise this episode is packed with wisdom, honesty, and heart. Enjoy. Hello and welcome, Jonathan. So happy to be talking to you today on Blueprint Breakers.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I know we've known each other for a little while and through social media, so I'm honored to be on.
Yes, what you teach and what you talk about is definitely top of mind for my listeners, and we'll get into that a little bit more in our conversation. But I'd love to hear just like a little bit of the backstory of why you do what you do. I mentioned I've followed you for a long time, so I know that you are a very successful dating coach, but your mission and your message has evolved over time. You talk a lot about self-love.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about the backstory of what has led you onto this path to serve.
I'll try to make this as brief as possible, but after turning 40 and going through a divorce almost 20 years ago, I found myself back out in the dating marketplace. And this thing called online dating was relatively new at that point. I thought you could just type in what you wanted and someone would magically appear. And sure enough, someone did. And I went out on a date with someone, had a really nice date, but something wasn't right. And then went out on another date with someone else and wasn't right, another date. And I realized after 100 dates in 1 year, I was the common denominator. And at about that time, the movie The Secret came out and What the Bleep. And I started to listen to Tony Robbins and I realized I'm the common denominator, so I must work on myself. But what was interesting, I got addicted to online dating. Mostly I got addicted to talking to women, sharing our experiences about divorce, sharing our experiencing about raising children. And in many cases, it wasn't actually dating. It was just talking on the phone for hours and hours at a time. And it was both a catharsism for me, but it was also, I would say it was like replacing therapy. And so I began doing personal development, self-help, and spiritual work, but all along the way, talking to women about dating and relationships. And then a lot of times women would reach out to me and say, "Hey, Jonathan, would you look at my dating profile and help me make it better?" And I'm like, okay. So I'd give them they wanted the male perspective. And then they improved their profile. And then they go, "Would you look at this guy's profile and tell me what you think about the guy?" And literally that's where my dating coaching business was birthed. And at the time, I was very much a traditionalist. I followed traditional expectations because I'm a tail end baby boomer, Gen Xer. I was raised to go to college, get a job, meet a person, get married, buy a house, start a family. And I was really entrenched with that blueprint. And so at first I was sharing from that blueprint, but along the way, as I began doing personal development, self-help, spiritual work, and therapy, I realized that there are so many more moving parts to this whole process. And you know my backstory, but I'll share with everybody. In 2019, I lost my son to an accident. And in my grief, I really started to do a deeper dive into what it means to love yourself. And I began writing a book about self-love, a very simplistic book. But what I noticed is that the dating and relationships trigger some of our core wounds is I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not likable. And so my message has evolved since then from just traditional dating expectations, which is oftentimes romance based and chemistry based. And it's evolved to the understanding that if we're not working on filling our own love cup, it's difficult to love another human being. And yet we're trapped in this cycle of practically, in some cases, is I need you to love me so I can feel good about myself. And just even the survival trap, I need someone else to do life with because doing life by oneself is scary. So it's evolved and it keeps evolving. I'm learning new things every day. And so we can talk about that or whatever you'd like to talk, but that gives you the backstory, Amy.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and it's interesting because I'm like an elder Gen X, so we're in the same little demographic, and I'm finding that a lot of us have been walking a very similar path in terms of having a lot of discoveries that you're talking about.
Yeah.
We were all raised on that blueprint of what we were like supposed to do. And
Yeah.
now we're in this process of learning and expanding and evolving. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on how do I want to so basically my peers and women who are in situations like mine, they've done a lot of the work. They've done a
Yeah.
lot of the inner work. They've done a lot of the self-love work. They've had some of those ahas and they're working to get to a place where they don't necessarily need that external validation to feel good about themselves, to feel lovable.
Yeah.
And yet they still want a partner. And they're struggling with that balance. Do you feel like the approach and how you open yourself up to that, does it change when you have this new lens of looking at things? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to share right now some perceptions that are brand new to me that are literally being channeled as we speak. Because you said your audience are people that have done personal development, self help, spiritual work, therapy to be in a good place for themselves. But you said the word partner. And this is where it's getting tricky, particularly for those in
Mhm.
midlife. Now, I happen to specialize in midlife, which I say is after baby making years and before retirement. In fact, a significant percentage of my audience probably is over 50 years old, even up into 70 years old. And roughly about 75% of people in that demographic are divorced. So now partnership takes on a whole new meaning. And I think we're confused, is especially for those of us that have that baby boomer, early Gen Xer adoption of what partnership is, which is predominantly making babies and raising a family and merging assets and that sort of thing. When you're in your 20s and 30s, you're a blank sheet of paper. What about those of us that have children and have our own home and have our own life? I think there's this confusion of what partnership actually looks like and what that can be. And we have this kind of traditional expectation that's moving in together or getting married with someone, that's partnership. But today, a lot of people are like, look, I like my life the way it is. I want someone in my life, but I don't know if I want someone in my life 24/7 per se, or at least be with
Mhm.
them 24/7, because I think this is the evolution that we're beginning to notice, because all in relationships are actually becoming the rarity because people want some level of autonomy. And this is where it gets confusing, because I think we're so indoctrinated that serious relationships are all in, but not everybody's either capable of going all in or even wants all in relationships like a partnership. So now the word partnership is evolving, I believe. And I think it's a story you can write for yourself. I think it's about letting go of the traditional narratives and start writing your own story.
And so then you come to the point where the traditional methods that we've all used, because we've all had seasons of intense dating, we've all had seasons
Yeah.
of relationships, we've had seasons of intense online dating. And it seems like this is like a new season, and that trying to approach being open to and seeking a partner, it seems harder to go about finding that when you've got like a specific idea of what partnership can mean to you. It seems like that makes the pool of people even like smaller. So, have you adjusted how you advise around like meeting people and online dating and things like that? Is there changes we should make there?
This is a great question because I do believe now we have to look at relationships from an expanded territory. In other words, hooking up is a form of a short lived relationship. Friends with benefits is a form of a relationship without a lot of pressure. Even situationships where people are spending regular time together without a label has its own value, if you will. And then casual relationships have its place today in our environment. And then what is a serious relationship? Because the word, again, coming into partnership requires being able to say, I'm going to take care of you. I think when we think of the word partnership, this all in element is I'm going to take care of you. And a lot of people aren't capable of doing that, maybe due to financial resources, maybe due to emotional pains in their past. Maybe there's a childhood trauma that still is unresolved because relationships require emotional. Let's take away the physical responsibility of a relationship, which is time and energy and that sort of thing. But there's an emotional responsibility, and we have a significant percentage of the population that just isn't emotionally capable of doing that, or maybe their capacity to do it is very low. So I think looking at the word partnership has to be something that maybe gets reevaluated from that all in perspective. And what we've
Mhm.
noticed, I've noticed a lot of people, particularly in midlife, merging lives with another human being can be radically complicated. And some people don't have the capacity to go all in, but maybe they have the capacity to go partly in. And if two people are partly in, maybe they can form a partnership in a way that doesn't look traditional. I'm just hypothesizing this or offering it up as a conversation instead of getting so rigid in the traditional narrative of what partnership looks like.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Sometimes something is better than nothing at all. I know that might go against our grain, but sometimes just having somebody in your life for a period of time, not the destination until death do us part kind of thing, but for a period of time, we can grow with that person. We can grow from that experience. We can learn more about ourselves. And what I think most people are observing now is that having multiple different types of relationships are all part of our path for individual self love and growth. I think maybe it's about letting go of the destination and about finding out what this ride is about. I think it's when we get hung up on the destination and the expectations of a destination and that expectation of being all in might need a reevaluation. I'm just suggesting that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Even just
Okay.
in conversations that I have with girlfriends, I feel like we all have slightly different expectations of what we would like to have,
Yeah.
ideally in our lives. And we're pretty clear on what that is and very specific. I know you primarily work with women, and
Yeah.
I know you talk to men too.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of what other men are saying? Are they coming to these realizations also? Is this what's the
Well,
perspective coming from the men?
I would say the general population is rather clueless, men and women alike. I think and I say clueless, I don't think it's an intentional cluelessness. It's just we have these old fashioned scripts that are affecting us, and we're
Mhm.
butting up against these scripts because there's an evolution of what's happening in relationships, and we're in this, maybe we're in a space of limbo, if you will. I work predominantly with women just to give the male perspective in their life. I come from that vantage point. But the main message, if I'm really getting granular, is the most important thing I want to encourage everyone to do is operate from their authentic self. When you operate with your authentic self, where I noticed a lot of women struggle is they have a fear of speaking up because they have this relationship that's a little bit ambiguous. There's uncertainty going on, and they're afraid to speak up because it might jeopardize potential future. And my big encouragement is speak up. If it doesn't work out, that's okay too. But where women
Mhm.
oftentimes get trapped is their fear of opening up to deeper intimacy with someone for fear if it's someone running away. But you want that person to run away if they can't open up to deeper intimacy. At least you can do whatever you want. Let me just say this, but I think this ride of romantic partnership is really learning, I believe, is to operate from as close to your authentic self as possible, recognizing that we have things that we don't have to share everything. But if it's material to the
Mhm.
relationship, that's the encouragement. I think that's the healthiest form of partnership.
Yeah, I think some of the fear comes from a little bit of what you said before about sometimes we do feel like something is better than nothing and we don't want to risk whatever this ambiguous thing is that we have with the person. We're feel there's a bit of dissatisfaction. There's something else we want, but we don't want to lose all of it. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
occurred to me as I said, something is better than nothing, meaning the effort in this experience has value. So even though it's not the grand picture that you desire, okay, there's still a
Mhm.
value in this something. And to explore this something for all the juice that can come out of this something. But I think where we
Mhm.
get butted up against is the expectation of something greater, something more profound. And so we go, I'm going to forego something because I need it to be this great thing. But what if this journey for this go around with this person is to experience the fullness of it, even though it might not go the distance? Again, if you are compromising your authentic self for this something, then you're not really getting the juice out of the something.
I get that. So I think one of the things that I hear the most is we're just not meeting the people that we want to connect with on that
Yeah.
level, right? That's not happening. And I have most of my friends that are single and wanting to have someone in their life. Most of them have done online dating and have given up. And then
Yeah.
some of them are still doing it almost begrudgingly, right?
Yeah.
So it's, I'm going to do it. They're determined, but they're not all that hopeful about it, I think. So how do we approach it? I mean, it is still probably one of the best ways to meet new people, unless you have other thoughts on that. What do we do from here?
Let's reframe the word best way to the more, I'm going to use the word popular, or it just happens to be where we have an opportunity. Let's look at it. It happens to be the number one opportunity to meet people we wouldn't otherwise meet in our daily lives. And again, since I speak to a
Mhm.
midlife demographic, I work from home. I don't I go out in the world, I go to the grocery store and stuff like that, but it's not like single people are congregating. I've outgrown the nightclub and the dancing routine for meeting people. And
Mhm.
a lot of coaches will say, do the things you love and join meetup groups and all that. But you know what? Don't do it for the purpose of meeting someone. If you're going to do it for something you love. But again, that's still the exception versus the rule. Online dating is
Mhm.
the number one opportunity to meet people you wouldn't otherwise meet in your life. So then the question is, how can we do this more effectively? Number one, Amy, I will tell you, I look at dating profiles all day long from women as equal to men, and 97% of the profiles are just so poorly curated that garbage in is going to get garbage out. And yet, everybody, the irony is, if I speak to 97%, they think they have this great profile, but there's poor photographs. The essay wasn't really very well curated. The effort is mediocre at best. So, one is if you want to improve your odds, put together a stellar profile with stellar photographs and a stellar essay. Well, Jonathan, I don't know how to write a stellar essay. There's only like 100,000 coaches out there that will write an essay for you for $200 that you can get lit. By the way, now Chat GPT can do it for you, write your essay for you. That's much better than you can do yourself. Okay. So one is create a good essay for yourself. And by the way, I can't afford a photographer. This is the most important thing in your life. You know what? You can go on Groupon for $100 and get someone to take some good quality photographs for you. Or shoot, my smartphone is an amazing camera. Just hand your camera to someone and take some good pictures of yourself. That would improve your odds. Okay. Now, here's the tricky part, Amy. For those of us in midlife, it seems like people in their 50s and 60s, they're dating with eyes of a 20-year-old, meaning, in other words, their perception of attractiveness is still based on when they're in their 20s and 30s, instead of recognizing that, look, when we get into our 50s and 60s, people are losing their hair, people are growing bellies, getting wrinkles, and no disrespect, saggy boobs, and all that kind of stuff. And we have ED and we have all kinds of stuff going on, that it's about more about the person than about the looks. But the medium of online does hyper focus on looks. I encourage my clients to look at a man's profile and just simply ask themselves, does this person seem like a kind person? Have that in your consciousness. From that first impression, do they seem kind? And if they do, swipe right. Okay. Now, and when you swipe left, always say the following: I send you love. I send you love. In other words, send out energetic love to somebody that doesn't fit what you're looking for, instead of what I see a lot of women is, oh my God, he's disgusting. Oh my God, what's he doing? We have such judgment.
Yeah.
Maybe if we remove judgment from our methodology, we can start opening our heart to seeing that kind, caring person that might be behind the screen. These are just a couple things I would invite people to do.
I absolutely think you're spot on about how we're perceiving others,
Yeah.
and that the medium is like leaning towards the physical, and the quickness and the fact, like how fast things move and how you quickly can lose interest, and you're looking at the next profile, or you're looking to the next person, and that sort of thing. When you're actually having the dates, when you are connecting with people and you're dating, you mentioned how we've evolved what we're looking for and we're coming from a better place, but we might fall into old habits of what dating has always meant to us.
Yeah.
And we just start behaving the way we always did on like first dates, second dates, third dates, and the old days of rules and like all that stuff.
Sure.
So, any thoughts around like how do we show up for that first date as our authentic self and those first few dates?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a criticism, and only because I work with women more so than men. It's not directed as a criticism towards women, but I've often observed women come to me all the time, Jonathan, I know what I want. I know what I want. I know what I want in a relationship. And then they work with me and they go through this proprietary coaching program I created. And Amy, can you guess what they say every single time after doing some inner work? Why didn't my parents teach me this? Why didn't I learn this in school? Why didn't I learn this before I married the wrong person? So, first, we have to identify who is actually compatible with us. And I only say this because we no longer live in environments like tribes where literally all you had was the 25 people in front of you and you all shared the same culture, religion. It wasn't a melting pot. So, it was different hundreds of years ago. But understanding who you are and who's actually compatible with you will put the odds in your favor. I'm going to give you a crude example of where this doesn't work. I think in today's environment, if somebody is a radical conservative, they are not going to get along with a radical progressive. I'm just using an extreme example. It might be a question you want answered before you, just because they look good in the photograph, you may want that answered. And again, I'm talking about extremes. Because now I will say this, we are not 100% compatible with someone, but I think if we know who we are, we become more attuned to who could be a good fit for us from a romantic relationship perspective and even partnership perspective. So one is getting, and then having the bravery to ask some really tough questions early on so you don't get trapped in the deception of chemistry. And chemistry is radically deceptive. It was used for people to mate before birth control. Like mating was you connected sexually, you made a baby, and you had to stick it out. Now we're in a different environment. So it requires being a bit objective before the chemical bandwagon, that when chemistry takes over. And that's some of the things I encourage people, particularly women, to do.
Yeah, I like that. Jonathan, I really have enjoyed hearing your perspective and your approach. Any last words of advice or recommendations to us midlife women who are open to love, we're ready for love? Anything else that you'd like to say?
Yeah, I recognize that as we're sharing, we could spend another couple hours talking about this. I'll try to
I
make
know.
this as succinct as possible because you said looking for love. Okay. And I think it's important to recognize that the love starts from within. Okay. And I know that sounds like a corny cliche. You've got to love yourself before you can love another, but it's learning to really appreciate the relationship you have with yourself because we may not partner with someone. Okay. That just may not happen. Or you could partner with someone and they could pass away. That's a real possibility as we get on in age. So learning to find that relationship within yourself, I believe, is paramount, number one. But most importantly, I think if we let go of the partnership narrative, and what I mean to say is let go of the destination and go, okay, I'm not going to be focused on the destination, but I'm going to be curious about this. If two people connect and there's curiosity and you seem to be on the same wavelength, then see what unfolds, holding on to your autonomy, being genuinely honest and authentic and vulnerable with another person, and recognizing that another person isn't going to be able to fulfill all of our needs. But maybe there's some common ground with them that there's something to build on. You know what? I know this gets tricky when one person gets attached to another person and it doesn't become reciprocal. I know that can get very disheartening. But believe it or not, there's so much there. You know what? I learned more from I fell in love with someone and she ended the relationship. I learned more about myself after that relationship ended than I ever could while being in that relationship. So every experience has value. And if we can let go of the destination and enjoy the ride, along with being authentic, transparent, being in your sovereign space, then maybe you might get lucky and fall into partnership with someone, or you may get lucky and find an experience for your growth that will lead you to the next one and the next one. That's just my offer to everybody.
That's very wise words,
Oh,
Jonathan.
well,
I
thank you.
definitely connect with that. Thank you so much. And I will invite anyone who wants to hear more and learn more to check out your YouTube channel. I'll link to that in the show notes because I think it's always good to have some guidance and some help and support as we navigate through this. But I love this stop focusing on the destination piece. That's so key.
Yeah. I just want to say I've been guilty of this for such a long time. It's taken me a lifetime to learn to let go of the destination. So this isn't easy work. Let me just say that.
That's right. You learn and then you share what you're learning along the way. That's the
Exactly.
key. Thank you so much. It's been so great talking to you. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of the Blueprint Breakers podcast, Redefining Romantic Partnership. And thank you to our guest today, Jonathan Aslay. Go check out his YouTube channel. It is so refreshing to get the male perspective on dating and relationships. And thank you, the listener. We really appreciate your support by subscribing, sharing this podcast with others, and giving us a 5-star rating. Have a wonderful week. Keep on breaking those blueprints and rewriting your own.